All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my 2023 year in review video. We are going to go over and rank every single game I played this year. Every single thing that I completed on stream, everything that I completed off stream, everything that I played on Keith's channel. Barring, I'm sure I forgot one or two things, but I did my absolute best to include everything I could find. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. All right, so these 24 games are all of the games that I streamed on my channel, or I played on my channel that came out in 2023. We have another list of every single game I played, all 68 of them here, including on Keith's channel and on other things. So we're going to do two lists, and this gets into how the format is. I'm going to do 2023 alone. So this is 2023 releases, only games that came out this year, so that I can talk about them qualitatively, discuss them, do the sort of topical thing first. Then I will go ahead and do every single game that I played this year, even games that did not release this year, and show sort of how they compare with the games that just came out this year, because I think that will be fun and give some context into the sort of retro games that I play and the sort of way that I approach video games. And I think that will be pretty cool. So yeah, I think that's pretty good. All right. Oops. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So I'm gonna go back to my 2023 list. I'll probably add tiers, shift things around, talk about things, but let's go. All right. I'm probably gonna do this in order from worst to best, because I think that is an easier way to talk about things. I'll probably skip around a little bit in that order. It's not going to be 100% accurately ordered. It's going to be sort of my feelings on these games and how they compare to each other. I can say pretty definitively that like the top 3 are going to be my top 3 of the year, but everything else is going to be a little bit more nuanced and fluid. So let's just jump into it. Seems fun. All right. So, this does not need to be on this list. We'll ignore this. I meant to upload this to the other one. Can I remove that? I cannot. Okay, so ignore VTMB down there. Not meant to be there. All right, so these are the games I played this year on stream. Let me pull open my little spreadsheet. And we'll go over every single one, just sort of in the order that I did it. So let me go. Hold on. Count that. 24. Which one am I missing here? We'll hit it when we get there, and I'll make note of it. I'm missing one. Anyway, all right. So let's talk about this. This is gonna be fun. So, worst game I played in 2023 that came out in 2023. Tar says, Who's Lila? Who's Lila came out last year, so it's not on this list. It is a game that I played this year, but it is not. Oh, I know what game I'm missing. There we go. Halls of Torment. Perfect. Yeah. So, okay. Let's talk about the worst game I played this year. The absolute worst game I played this year is Wolong Fallen Dynasty. This game is hot garbage. This game is a Souls-like, sort of. It apes Souls-like games. But it is actually a gacha game. It's a loot game. It has probably the most incomprehensible upgrade and build system in any Souls-like. I really feel like this game fundamentally doesn't understand what makes character action games good and doesn't understand what makes Souls-likes good. Its level design is just objectively terrible. It does not reward exploration, and it does not reward conscious decision making around its encounter design. Part of this is directly related to how this game approaches builds. Pretty much every build is the same. You have, the same set of attacks that do sort of the same or cover the same set of things in each element. And the game kind of front loads this idea that elements are going to be really important and they're going to counter each other. But they don't. They don't matter at all. They're completely not important. And the entire game is undone by its morale system. The single most important aspect of your character is their morale, which is the amount of enemies that they've killed without dying. It's more complicated than that, but that's effectively what it is. Increasing your morale steamrolls the game, allows you to actually play it, and once you get a high morale, dying only decreases it a little. So it's not really a problem. It completely maintains itself, and it's just not even worth playing if you're not going to farm morale. Weapon feel is really terrible. There was not a single weapon in that game that I particularly liked or was drawn to. One thing that I will say about it is that I really like the sound design in that game. The way that the dodge and the parry sound is amazing. Unfortunately, they feel like garbage because dodge and parry are on the same button, and the game is very floaty feeling, so you can often accidentally trigger both or trigger dodge when you mean to parry, or trigger parry when you mean to dodge. Wo Long Fallen Dynasty has one of the worst narratives I've ever played in a video game. It's an adaptation of a story and still manages to feel like it's just connective tissue. It's just bad Dynasty Warriors, and I don't know if there's a way to make Dynasty Warriors good. And that really is all Wo Long is. It's just bad, worse, maybe, Dynasty Warriors, because it tries hard and fails miserably in every respect. Cool. All right. That's the D tier. I think that's the only game fully in the D tier here. I think it is by far and away the worst game I played this year in terms of 2023 releases. It is not good. It is a very bad game. All right. Now we get to move on to slightly more interesting games. Interesting games. I'm going to put Halls of Torment right here. And there's a reason for that. That makes it seem like Halls of Torment is a bad game. It is not. Halls of Torment is fine. This is pretty much a Garlic-like mixed with some various, top-down looter-style roguelike stuff. If you've played Vampire Survivors, you've played Halls of Torment. It's just got a little bit more of a Diablo 2 flavor to it. It's pretty all right. I really don't have a lot to say about this game. I just sort of played it while we were playing Project Zomboid. I forgot to put Project Zomboid on the list. I'll do that right now. That was one of the ones that I forgot. That's going to be a whole project to talk about. Let's just go ahead. Because I probably have more interesting things to say about that game than people expect. But all right. That's not a 2023 game. That's a 2019 game. So we'll go ahead and add it to this list. Zomboid. Okay, cool. Ignore Project Zomboid down here. Cool. So Halls of Torment I just played while we were playing Project Zomboid. It was an all right game. I really don't have a lot to say about this one. That's kind of the problem with some of these C-tier games, is that there just isn't a lot to say. They're games I played. I don't think they do anything particularly interesting. I don't think Halls of Torment is trying to. It just sort of is a well-balanced little, clicky roguelike game that you play, and then you never think about again. So, from there, we're going to have Amnesia the Bunker. Amnesia the Bunker's fine. It is interesting because it's an entire game built around the conceit of amnesia, where you're powerless and you're running away from enemies and you're hiding and you're trying to explore a creepy, scary environment. And I think a lot of the stuff that it does with that game, with that idea, is pretty interesting, right? Like, you're in a World War I bunker, you're in the trenches, you're scared, you can't see anything, you're trapped somewhere. This was a cool game. And I think the most interesting part of it is that the way that it is structured is more of a throwback to, or a refinement, maybe even wholly focused on. My webcam fell down. Wholly focused on the idea. The idea of the item box run in a Resident Evil or in a survival horror game. So what do I mean by that? Basically, the entire game is I need to go to X location to pick up an item, and then I need to find my way back to my safe room so I can store the item. Then I need to get the item that I stored and bring it to another location. Now, you're never going from exactly from point A to point C in Amnesia. You're always looping back to point B, that hub room, that safe room that you go to. And the way the game interacts with that safe room and interacts with your interactions with your routing to get back to that safe room is really intriguing. The story writing around it, the story of the two comrades in arms and sort of the descent into madness that was created in their efforts to try and escape and deal with the trenches. All of that was cool writing. I don't think it was particularly well integrated into the gameplay design or even really anything the game was doing. So in a way, this game felt very segmented between the story it was telling and the gameplay it was giving us. And as a result, it didn't really impact me very much. It just sort of happened at me, and I enjoyed my time with it, and then it was over, which I don't think is a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing to be at all. Oh, Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes The Awakened. Probably right around here in this C tier. Sherlock Holmes The Awakened was better than Chapter 1 in every single regard. But it still is just kind of a bad adventure game. I think that the narrative and the story is kind of intriguing, and especially by the end where it starts to get a little bit meta with its narrative, it starts to do interesting things. I think it's really constrained by the developers and the fact that they are so stuck in this need to make what is effectively a modern point-and-click adventure game. All of the puzzles are extremely railroaded. There were tons of moments where I was like, all right, can I do this? I think I've solved this. And then it's like, nope, you have to find an item that in this particular order. And even though I had already figured out what the solution was that we needed to do. And so that kind of drags that game down. I don't really think I would recommend it to anyone, but it is batshit insane. And it's a lot of fun. That's a weird and quirky series that I want to get back into and play some more of. But especially this game it's better than Chapter 1, but it's a weak game. It feels unpolished. It feels sort of half-baked. It's a remake of a previously well-liked Sherlock Holmes game, but it is, it's got that stink on it a little bit. If you watch the playthrough, you know that it was pretty buggy for me. Things kind of broke a lot, didn't work super great. But even with that, it was an interesting experience, and I had a good time. And I think, of course, it's a very interesting looking game. It's got unique art direction, even when the graphics and the overall technical execution is not wonderful. And I think that, aside from some of its weirder choices, it was fun. It was a fun experience. And so if you're interested in that sort of game and interested in sort of those point-and-click adventure throwbacks games, Sherlock Holmes The Awakened is not going to do you any harm to play. It was not amazing, but it was not great either. My next choice here is going to probably piss a lot of people off, but Dredge is also probably down here. I'd put it above Amnesia the Bunker, but below everything else. Dredge is yet another game in a long line of games that I feel like exists as a game just because the people who made it like video games or like the idea of a video game, and not because what it was trying to do is particularly well suited to a video game. Dredge is a very sort of lovingly rendered and lovingly written concept. But as a game, it feels like a tech demo. What you do in that game does not evolve from moment one to the end. You sometimes get ship upgrades that increase your inventory or increase your distance that you can go or increase how much you can see. But in general, your interaction with mechanics does not change no matter what. It doesn't change based on how much you know about the environment. It doesn't even really have that like Metroid Brainia appeal of like, oh, I understand this part of the world now, so I'm going to go tackle that. It's like a completely non-linear experience, so the entire game feels entirely flat, with the order that you can approach various obstacles and various objectives. And while it's cool that that is that game and that it's like this relaxing fishing horror game that you can play that isn't that stressful, I feel like that comes at the cost of literally just being an engaging game. It feels like the only reason why this is a game is because twee indie developers who really have a concept that they want to put together that is like, they created like a mood board of a game and then published it in a game, and just not really anything, like there's nothing there. There's no meat to it. It's got great writing, has really cool, fun music, really wonderful art direction, but it just isn't like it doesn't feel like a fully baked idea. And there's just other things that I can do with my time. And while I don't regret playing it, I do think it's better than Amnesia: The Bunker. I just feel like I would love to see what these people do next and see what they actually want to make as a game, rather than sort of delivering me what was effectively a bunch of assorted like writing in the package of like a really unengaging mobile game. Like that's what Dredge felt like to me. As someone who played it, I binged it the day that it came out. I played it in 2 days and then I put it all on YouTube. It just was not, I just don't think it does anything. I don't think it's a particularly interesting game. It's got a lot going for it though, and I do think that whatever they make next will be really intriguing. Next one is also probably gonna bug some people. So I'm bracing for this impact. World of Horror. World of Horror, I think, is a little bit better than Dredge, but I think that it suffers from all of the same issues. World of Horror, like Dredge, is a game that kind of feels like it is aping the image of other games. It wants to be the trendy, cool, dynamic, randomized roguelike with a bunch of things. And it feels like, I'm playing this game and it genuinely, I can tell that the person who made it went, you know what would be cool? If there was a roguelike with RPG elements that's 2-bit and looks like Junji Ito. And that's the entire idea. That's the entire idea in execution, in concept. It's not really playing with anything interesting. It's not really saying anything. It is what it is on the tin. That is not necessarily a bad thing. I think World of Horror is great at what it does. And it's really fun to play. But there's not, like, once you crack the code, once you figure out what items you want to get, what events to focus on, how to get endings, it just, you begin to see through the mirage a little bit. And then it just kind of is over. Like the moment you see behind the curtain of that game and see the mechanics, it stops being interesting because there's a right answer for every situation, and the situations aren't varied enough or dynamic enough to make you have to change your approach. And then even when you go through everything and you start getting different endings and start tackling other timelines, and even play harder difficulties, which I did off stream after I finished streaming it, because there have been moments where it's on my Steam Deck. I'm like, oh cool, I'll play this, or it's on my laptops and stuff where it's like, I have 10 minutes, I'll play some World of Horror. It never ever changes or makes me have to change. And I think in a roguelike, that's a pretty brutal position to be in. Because these games live and die off their communities and off of the dynamism of their runs, and this game is pretty static. So that's World of Horror. However, playing it, sort of figuring it out was really interesting and was really fun in the moment. It's just, it doesn't have any longevity, which is why I ultimately stopped playing it. Um, yeah. So there are those. I'm gonna start moving towards the upper tiers now. Seth is here. Hey Seth, welcome. Uh, yeah. So we're gonna start getting into more interesting games up here. And this is where my order is gonna go kind of weird because there are some things that I like want to talk about, but like also don't really know how to begin approaching them. So there are going to be some interesting genre mixes here in these categories that I'm not going to be able to completely explain, but it might be kind of interesting. So next is Tales. So I'm going to start this by saying something kind of contradictory and oxymoronic, but Tales is a B tier game with all of the same flaws that most of these C tier games have. The big difference between Tales and the rest of them is that Tales really strongly learns from the lessons of its previous game, Backbone, and actually has things to say. And every single moment of this point-and-click adventure game is tied into the centralized theme. So when your core writing experience, when your core experience in your game is about your writing, you need to have a strong thematic through line that justifies that writing and that narrative in that writing, right? The things that you do in the game need to reward you with the writing that they want you to see, and the writing that you need to see needs to reward and inform the decisions you're making in the game. Tales nails this. It is actually a very, very good point-and-click adventure, even though it's not hard, even though there aren't really puzzles in the same capacity that other point-and-clicks are. The character writing is extremely contextualizing and interesting. Even though there are branches in the game, it's not particularly dynamic, but every single time I played it and every storyline that we went did feel like it was being influenced by my decisions and contextualized by the things I was doing, and that helped me build these characters that I felt were informing the narrative and creating this interesting dichotomy of themes that would then obviously pay off in its sequel, the game it is a prequel to, Backbone. Now, Backbone's not a very good game. Backbone kind of falls apart, especially towards the end. It just sort of ends, and it doesn't really have a whole lot to say. It's sort of cashes out all of its ideas for kind of cheap nihilism by the end. So that kind of does hurt Tales, but Tales as a standalone experience is a pretty solid game. I highly recommend it for people who like point-and-click adventures, who like furry games, who like pixel art. It's pretty cheap. It's worth playing. It's pretty quick. It took us 5 hours, I think, to get through, and we were going slow because I was reading all the dialogue. So yeah, that's Tales. That's, I think, the bottom of B tier. Let's talk about another game, another weird game at the bottom of B tier. MK1. MK1 is a competitive fighting game. But it's a weird competitive fighting game, and it doesn't play by all the same rules that all the other fighting games that I play by. And I think this is really just a personal thing, but Mortal Kombat 1's a great game. It's a great competitive fighting game if you want to play a competitive fighting game and you like Mortal Kombat, you like the over-the-top gore, go ahead and play it. You'll love it. I'm sure you'll spend a lot of time on ranked, you'll spend a lot of money on skins, it'll be fun for you. But there is something about Mortal Kombat's game feel that is really singular that I just didn't love. I think that and this is actually something that was like exemplified by the competitive meta. The game was extraordinarily unbalanced at launch. There were tons of like really, really crazy unblockables and free resets and stuff like that just like, it's not the kind of stuff you see in most fighting games. It played a little fast and loose with how the game worked. The partner system, the cameo system, the assists in this game were really, really cool. But it was a very centralized meta around characters like Cyrax, and I can't remember her name. It starts with an S. It's like Sahira or something. The knife-tossing lady. She has got like circular blades. And that became really exhausting to play around because whole teams were based around Serena. That was her name. Around those kind of builds of like, how do we get combo extension from Cyrax? He kind of does it all. How do we deal with Serena, who can she's free damage for everyone, things like that. And so it kind of developed a weird meta. Tournament play was really odd because of the Jax and what's her name, Sindel sort of stuff that you could set up. Just a really odd experience. Shao Kahn was really bugged as well in the early patches. I don't know how it is now, so maybe if I played it now it would change, but got a block button, has weird combo feel, weird game feel. It's just uniquely Mortal Kombat. Its story is stupid as hell, as you would expect. I kind of hated it. I really don't like the story modes in fighting games. I think all of them are bad. I don't think there's any reason to ever play a story mode or even really any single player content in a fighting game. I truly don't think it's worth it. I think fighting games are competitive multiplayer games. That's all they need. I don't care about single player content, and I think all of it is universally bad and poorly designed. But Mortal Kombat 1 has a at least goofy 4-hour long story if that's something that you're interested in. So go ahead and pick that up if you like that sort of thing. Right next to Mortal Kombat 1, Granblue versus Rising. Granblue Fantasy versus Rising is another competitive fighting game. It's pretty solid. I like it a lot. This is my current fighting game that I play a lot of, and by that I mean I've played 7 hours in the past 2 weeks because I've been so busy, and it's only been out for 2 weeks. But it's a pretty good one. It's Street Fighter, but with anime gacha characters. This one's pretty solid. Its mechanics are really simple. It has all the same flaws as Mortal Kombat 1. It's got a block button, so left-right mix is weird. It has kind of canned combos. Everyone's routing is really the same, so it's a really accessible fighting game. And it has Smash-like inputs, where instead of doing motion inputs, you're pressing a direction and a special button to do your special attacks. Special attacks are on cooldown, which is an interesting fold to introduce to a fighting game. I don't know if I love it or I hate it, but it's kind of cool. But yeah, Granblue Fantasy versus Rising is great. Very unbalanced. Nier is just a menace in this game. There's not too much to talk about. That's my whole review. I like it a lot. It plays like Street Fighter, but with anime characters. Very similar to DNF Duel, if you ever played that, but with a lower power level, unless you're playing as Nier, in which case you can kill everyone off of basically any confirm. So do with that information as you will. The fighting games on this list are going to be interesting to talk about in relationship to each other. So we'll have to save the rest of that discussion for here, but all right, let's go for a weird one. I'm going to pick a gacha game. My one gacha game that I played this year, Limbus Company. Limbus Company is going at the top of C. I have a lot of things to say about this. Limbus is a profoundly well-written visual novel, and it's a very generous gacha game. It still is a gacha game. Still is a gacha game, so that's a bummer. I've gotten pretty much to the dungeon in Kanto 5. So I'm pretty caught up, not completely, but pretty close. Been playing it for about 2 weeks. I like it a lot. I like all of the characters. And if you know anything about me, you know I hate gacha. I have no interest in gacha. I have played a few of them. I don't think any of them are good. Limbus is the best gacha game that I have ever played. And the reason for that is it's not a gacha game in design. The gacha elements of this game feel profoundly tacked on. And that's actually also the game's biggest downfall. Because when you get to difficulty spikes in this game, you basically only have 2 options. You do extremely unorthodox strategies that sometimes require specific IDs and ego, which isn't super hard because you can borrow companions and IDs and stuff from your friends on your friends list. But playing this as a single player game, you can just get screwed and have a bad time with RNG. There are certain fights in this game where if you roll bad on your first attack, you just have to start the fight over, because you will lose your ability to steamroll with SP if you start on the wrong foot, and it will make you lose clashes, which is the game's main mechanic, which will make you take damage, which will kill you. Zen says Project Moon difficulty spikes. Ren says thinking about the solo Ishmael runs on 530. I'm on 530 right now. That's where I am. So even just doing solo Ishmael on there, if you miss if you miss your first clash, you're fucked. You just have to start over. And that's not a big deal because energy in that game is a very generous resource. It refunds you whatever energy you lost -1, I think, if you need to retry a fight. So you're just not lost there. That's not a big deal. But it is true that you are going to hit a wall, and sometimes it's going to be reliant entirely on your resources, and sometimes that means you just have to grind or you just have to get lucky on your extractions. You have to do your dailies. And when that content treadmill starts, that sucks. But the thing that I will say about Limbus Company is it has changed the way that I perceive gachas, and I think I sort of get them now. Limbus Company is closer to a webcomic than it is a video game. It has a really cool video game, and I would play Limbus Company if it was its own thing, if it was its own single-player game without the gacha mechanics. The thing that is interesting about that is that I am now compelled to play the game more for seeing the updates and seeing what happens in this ongoing serialized narrative than I am just for its mechanics. Because I do like its mechanics. Its battle mechanics are really cool. Its team building is really cool. The strategy around it, even when unorthodox and unintuitive, is interesting. I'm still here for this in the same way that I was there for Homestuck in 2012. Like, I am playing it to see the story, to see the characters. The game will catch me up to that. And then I'm here with a group, like, sitting there watching the game play out and the narrative play out as it happens. And that community and that appeal is what makes gachas interesting. And looking at things like Genshin Impact or Honkai or any other number of gachas, Hosamo, things like that, Live a Hero, all of those games thrive off that community. Limbus is the same way. And so I understand the appeal of a gacha in that regard, in the idea of like subsidizing a webcomic you like. So read that as you will. All right, let's move on from here. I know I said we're moving on to the B tier, but there's going to be probably a few more things in the C tier. This one pains me. Final Fantasy 16 C tier around Limbus. Limbus is probably better. How do I feel about this? Probably like this. Final Fantasy 16 starts off absurdly well, and its writing is really, really compelling and excellent for the first rough half of the game. A lot of people have discoursed the narrative and how it treats its characters. I'm not going to get into this. This is not like a super spoilery thing. This is not what that's for. But what I will say is about 2/3 of the way through the game, the budget cuts and the development hell starts to sink in. Ruben says, give it to me straight. Is the combat good for a DMC fan? So that's part of the issue. The combat for the first third of the game is excellent. It constantly changes. You're getting new abilities. You are building out a character kit. And this is probably my biggest complaint with this game summarized. Every single ability you get for the first 3 abilities is essential, and every combat encounter is designed around them. You have a parry that increases stagger and is very powerful and protects you from big damage you otherwise can't get through. So it's a big risk, big reward button. There is a grab, like Nero's grab, that pulls you to enemies or pulls enemies to you, pulls you to enemies to you. But it also will allow you to off-balance staggered enemies. Every single enemy in the game, this can be done to. So all big enemies, all bosses, function around this mechanic of pulling them off balance. And then you have a teleport. The teleport is really useful because you can air combo people and teleport to them to continue your air combo. Those are the first 3 of, I think, 6 or 7 abilities you get in the game. And the other, let's say, 4 are useless because no encounter is designed around them, and none of them are actually powerful enough to offset the utility of those 3 abilities. So after you hit that combat wall, you will do the same exact combo on every single enemy, every single time for the rest of the game with no change. You will parry the same way, you will combo the same way, you will teleport the same way. There is an optimal combo to do that is the same for the entire cast. And it is terrible. And around that time, when that starts to happen, that's when the game, for lack of a better word, falls apart. 2/3 of the narrative is interesting political intrigue that sort of delves into the anime problem, not delves into, but falls into the trap of like anime power level. Like, we're no longer going to be about international politics. We're going to be now talking about gods and ideology in abstract concepts, and my power level is higher than yours, which is really dumb. But you get to this point where you go to another continent, and this whole game has been building up to this other continent, and it opens up and it's a huge map with this wide expanse, and there are 3 things to do in it. It is super clear that this game was unfinished. It is super clear that it just begins shuffling you from cutscene to cutscene rather than having any interstitial material, and its interstitial material is bare bones and often nonsensical. So Final Fantasy XVI starts extremely strong and ends extremely disappointingly, and it upsets me because I liked Final Fantasy XVI. I was a believer. It was the Final Fantasy game I had been waiting for a decade, for that first 7-8 hours. Really politically intriguing, nuanced character relationships, really interesting adult. And when I say adult, I don't mean sex and violence and swearing. I mean adult, like nuanced character motivations and ideas, themes, dealing with like one's place in the world and obligations and duties to each other and their communities, and like what the complex like relationships between countries actually do for people geopolitically. That was all really great. It just falls apart the moment it becomes a shonen battle anime, and it is just so much worse off for it. So that's an issue with Final Fantasy XVI. All right. From there, Dead Space Remake. Dead Space Remake is an assuredly good game. It is a weird take on Dead Space. I think it is actually a lot less refined than the original Dead Space. I think I like a lot of its changes. 3D environments, especially in 0G, are really cool. A lot of the navigation that you do in that game is really pleasant. But I think by splitting the game out from a level system and making it an open hub, it really breaks the resource economy in this game. I think for the most part, it's still just Dead Space, which is great because I love the first Dead Space. I think a lot of the changes that they made to the lore to tie it more into Dead Space 2 is really interesting. There's a lot of setup in this game that really should have been in the first Dead Space, but they didn't realize it was a franchise, obviously, when they were making that, so that's that. But yeah, Dead Space Remake, it was good. I do think that it's a little bit unrefined. I do think that it's a little bit stagnant. I think the choice to make Isaac talk is still a really bad choice. It's interesting because Dead Space 1 is a game about how a workman-like attitude and perspective can push you through trauma and bad work conditions, and it's very interestingly like a game about keeping your head down and dealing with your problems. And Dead Space 2 is a game about like hating, or Dead Space Remake is a game about like having to put up with bad coworkers and also all of your coworkers hating you too. So it's like a weird inversion of the aesthetics and the framing of the first Dead Space. But yeah. Yeah, that's Dead Space. I really wish I had more to say about it, but it's weird because it's a game that came out in a year where my next game came out. I think this is fair. Resident Evil 4 Remake is a stellar survival horror game that it somehow manages to improve on one of the best games of all time. Resident Evil 4 Remake is so incredible. Every single change from the original, whether it be opening up maps or closing them off, allowing you to move more, restricting your ability, changing, truncating, etc., all of the various aspects of Resident Evil 4 and remixing it into this more interesting, sort of logical, tone-controlled version of RE4 didn't remove the campy fun of Resident Evil 4 original. In fact, it enhanced it. It makes the funny stuff hit harder. It makes the serious stuff hit harder. Leon and Ashley's relationship is wonderful. The character rehabilitation they did for Ashley in this game is just bar none, maybe the single best thing that they've ever done in Resident Evil. People are going to criticize like Ada's voice acting or sort of the additional Krauser stuff and things like that. I don't think any of that is really worth docking this game any points. I think this game's amazing, and I'm including Separate Ways in this because it really just isn't a different thing. It's just part of the game. Separate Ways is an incredible video game DLC add-on. It is also only like 3.5, 4 hours long-ish. 5 if you're going slow like I did and was on streamer time. Game's great. Game just kicks ass. There's so much to say about what they've done for Leon, how they've evolved him from Resident Evil 2 Remake and his previous incarnations in the series. Honestly, the biggest downside of Resident Evil 4 Remake is that at the end of Separate Ways, it sets up Wesker in a Resident Evil 5 Remake. And, you can just delete Wesker. He sucks. We don't need any more of him. He doesn't make any sense. His ideology's stupid. I don't care. He's not a good villain. He's not interesting. Just give me more mooks. Like I want the RE2 we're in a bad situation, let's get out of it style gameplay and narrative. I don't want big bads at Umbrella becoming Agent Smith from the Matrix. I don't care about any of that. Neato. Cool, let's continue. This is gonna get a little weird. We're gonna be skipping around the tiers a little bit here. All right, so System Shock Remake. System Shock Remake is just above Dead Space. A lot of remakes this year. I really like this game. It is a cool early ImSim, and it's a throwback to those early ImSims. It struggles against a lot of the others because, and when I say others, I mean other ImSims, because like it is really restrictive and it's not particularly ambitious, but it is a really loving remake with incredible art direction, really great voice direction. It has a lot of love for the ideas of the original 2 System Shocks, and it incorporates a lot of those elements that I think any logical developer would have incorporated had they had the technology previously. It's just a really stellar game. A good shooter, feels good to play, feels good to toggle abilities on and off. Not very cumbersome, has a great inventory system, really, really amazing soundtrack. Overall, its narrative is as good as it ever was, maybe even better than the original because of all the added content that is in it. I really think if you like PC shooters, if you like immersive sims, if you're interested in stealth games or even sci-fi games or just weird FPS RPG combinations, play System Shock, the remake. It is excellent. The final fight is terrible. It was also terrible in the original. What can you do about that? But and the game does kind of overstay its welcome because it's pretty long. It took us longer to beat the remake than it did the original System Shock. But overall, just really stellar work on part of Night Dive. Just really great stuff. Check out the playthrough if you want to. I talk about a lot of fun things there. Cool. Another remake. Super Mario RPG remake right here at the top of B with System Shock. I'm gonna blaze through this one. It's Super Mario RPG, exactly as you remember it, but better and prettier. That's it. Super Mario RPG is a really charming game, very accessible RPG, has a lot of active mechanics, really wants you to feel part of the game world. A huge focus of both its art direction and its new cutscene direction is tangibility, in the same way that like a Pixar film really focuses on the the physical and emotional like dynamism of characters and scenes. Everything is so lovingly crafted and curated in this sort of toy box dynamic and aesthetic, and it shows in every aspect of the game. It's clever, it's funny, every single fight is good. There is not a single bad encounter in that game that doesn't at least make you think, that's kind of a cool way that they want me to play this. They want me to choose different options. If you like turn-based RPGs, if you like Nintendo games at all, if you like Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy or JRPGs in general, you owe it to yourself to play Super Mario RPG. It is the single best Switch game that came out this year, period. I'm not going to fight anyone about this. Play this game. It's really good. All right, cool. That's so that's a lot of the little guys out of the way. It's funny to call these little guys like Super Mario RPG is literally a Nintendo game, but I think I have a lot more to say about a lot of these games. So this one might be a hot take, but Arches, Arches is a visual novel. It's a good one. It's in B tier. Arches was a really fun playthrough. I really liked it. I really liked the themes of sort of messy living, of needing to survive, and like what survival actually means. I think a lot of narratives take survival and trauma and they bundle them as things that, even when they're ongoing, are like a great justice or a great victory. I don't think there are any victories in Arches. Arches is a very sad story about people who can't really make choices and feel trapped, much like Echo was, who are struggling with sort of not just addictions, but cycles of trauma and harm, often self-perpetuated. It is a really well-written story. It doesn't overstay its welcome. And I like that it has no choices in it, because that's ludonarratively interesting. The reason why it's in B tier is because it is a pretty simple visual novel. It's a really good one. I like it a lot. Honestly, I don't know why it's a visual novel. I don't know why. It's something I ask myself as well with a lot of my writing and a lot of the things that I want to do with my visual novel. It's like, why am I not just doing this as a webcomic? Why am I not just doing this as a book? And the answer is, it's just because this is where the audience is, I guess. It is what it is. So I don't think Arches is gonna stand against all of the greats of the genre that do the crazy big things. I found it emotionally impactful and well written and worth commendation. It is artistically very satisfying. Is it a game I would tell every single person to play in 2023? No, not really even close. But if it is something that you like and it's something that you're interested in, I would say give it a shot. Give it a shot, because it's a cool game. It's a very, very well written visual novel. It's got great characters. And especially if you like Echo, you owe it to yourself to read Arches, because it is literally just Echo Route 6, and it's essential. It's essential for understanding that series. And I know it's not going to be the end for that series, but I really think that our Echo and Arches are a really great duology, and I kind of don't need to see any more in that universe to have gotten a lot out of Echo and Arches. I think they pair together very well, and they feel very definitive, even with cliffhanger endings and setup for more stuff. So that's Arches. Let's talk about a game I don't have too much to say about, but I like a lot. Armored Core 6. Armored Core 6 is the magical FromSoft juice. It feels good. I like to drink it. Armored Core 6 feels great. It's a very interesting take on Armored Core. The design, and especially encounter design in this game, is based entirely around making you and forcing you to interact with the mechanics. It wants you to be swapping out your builds, changing, being adaptable. Learning how to be a Raven is a huge aspect of this game. And that ties into even the lore and the setting and all of the geopolitical events that happen in this game. It's all about change and adaptation. And all of its mechanics are also built into this. You aren't punished for buying resources because you can sell them back for their buy price. You can customize your units to your heart's content. And it even has some genuinely awesome multiplayer. It has like maybe the best arena-based fighting in any FromSoft game. And those builds, that meta is so dynamic. In fact, if this was just a multiplayer ranking list, Armored Core 6 would be maybe one of my favorites, if not my favorite multiplayer game of this year. It is so cool. Level design, obviously, is centered around scale and scope. It is a game where you are generally not exploring the environment. You do get rewarded for exploring because there is a lot of hidden stuff and lore pickups and secondary objectives. But really, this game is focused around the combat, and that is what every single piece of the game is designed around. Highly recommend playing if you haven't checked it out. Many of you will bounce off of this game. This game is very hard, and it also is just a different kind of game than most people expect. It is not an easy hack and slash action game. It is a strategy game, first and foremost. It is a building game, first and foremost. And there's a lot of things to balance. You have to count your ammo. You have to count your resources. You are constantly going to be score attacking this game to try to get the highest score, like you would in something like a Devil May Cry, though obviously with less like combo mechanics. So if that sounds up your alley, if you like car simulation games and tweaking builds and figuring out what the game is asking of you to provide an answer to different encounters, Armored Core 6 is your game. You're going to fall in love with it, and you're going to play it for 2,000 hours. SF6, baby, what can I say? This game's the whole package. This is not my favorite fighting game of this year, which might be weird because I ranked it so highly. But I do think it's the most important fighting game of this year, and I think it's the most well-designed fighting game of this year. Street Fighter 6 is so holistically designed from a systems perspective. Every single character has a function, and every single move does something. For a newly released fighting game, it is profoundly balanced. It is so good. Even the worst characters in the cast are winning majors and are doing things. The depth of this game's decision-making is utter insanity. This game is going to have a lifetime longer than I think any Street Fighter game other than Third Strike. This game is amazing. It's got great netcode, great matchmaking, great combo trials that teach you true important things about your characters and their mechanics and how they function. The game gets out of your way and helps you learn it, which is the most essential accessibility idea for a fighting game. Grand Blue might have more accessible controls with its Smash-like inputs. Even modern controls on Street Fighter 6 might be more accessible. But just playing the game and learning how to play it is easier in Street Fighter 6 than maybe any other fighting game I have ever played. So that's just amazing. It's so comprehensively created, and its community is so good that your own growth as a player can be really easily tracked. It's very easy. It's got all the tools that you need to watch your replays, slow things down, see where things went wrong, look at your interactions, figure out your frame data. Like, it's so easy. It's so easy to get better at that game. And I have a fucking series to prove it. I climbed from silver to diamond using a character I've never played in a fighting game before. In any Street Fighter, I've never played Dhalsim, and I learned him from the ground up in SF6 without watching any guides because he was the least played character in the game. I just learned it by playing it, and it's so good. It also has World Tour. Now, if I was ranking World Tour would be the worst game I played this year. It is a grindy piece of trash single-player mode that doesn't teach you how to play the game because it's too interested in allowing you to make a super character that can have everyone's moves. You do not approach neutral or damage or combos or punishment in this game the way that you do in the competitive game. But It can also be completely fucking ignored, which it should be because it's terrible. The mini games are pretty good for learning how to do motion inputs, though. However, everywhere else on this list, Street Fighter stays here. Capcom's winning here with 2 games in the A rank. Good for them. Tire Sun Mania asks, why Third Strike? Third Strike is literally still a healthy game. People play it every day. I play Third Strike multiple times a week. It is just the deepest fighting game ever made. That's all there is to say about it. It's so good. The parry system is incredible. The decision making on strike throw is really, really nuanced for a Street Fighter game, especially. Characters have endless depth in that game. There is still innovation happening all of these years later in Third Strike. I just don't think there's anything that can really compare to it and to compare to the love that people have for that game, except maybe something like Marvel 3. But yeah, so that's that. All right, we're getting down to the bottom of the list. Heidi 2. Heidi 2 is pretty good. This game is weird, and that's kind of its biggest problem. Spider-Man 2 feels like the first half of 3 games. It's the first half of 3 extremely good games, but it has way too many cooks in the kitchen. Mechanically speaking, there is very little to say about this game that I wouldn't also say about Spider-Man 1. They do decrease the amount of tedious, busy work you need to do to 100% of the game. I 100% of the game in 3 days. I played it after stream until like 4 in the morning for 3 days in a row, and I banged the game out. I got everything done on the hardest difficulty. I loved this game. It has great cutscenes, excellent voice acting, a really, really great set of performances. It's just, again, it's a Venom story. It's a Kraven story. It's a Miles Morales taking over for Peter Parker story. And all 3 of those things are sort of on their own paths, and they sometimes rub against each other, but they never fully converge. And as a result, the game feels very fractured. It has a lot of setup for a third Spider-Man game and for the Venom game that got leaked. But Insomniac is probably the team I trust the most with the Marvel properties. People know this about me. I love Marvel. I love Marvel stuff. I still go see every MCU film in the theaters. I think that most of them are really good movies. I watch all the TV shows. I think most of them have been really excellent. I think a lot of the critique around superhero stuff and around comic book stuff and serialized media in general happens in very bad faith and in aesthetic posturing of trying to seem cool and more elite than you are for not liking the big mainstream thing. And what I will say is, even if I didn't like Marvel, the Insomniac Spider-Man games are really special. They're really, really excellent games. Wonderful movement. They are the only open world games I have ever played that have actually enjoyable movement. Exploring in those cities is fun. Interacting with people on the ground is interesting. And it has a lot to say about community and people and how we help each other and what our obligations are to our towns and our friends and the people that we owe the quality of our life to. And I think that's really meaningful. And I think that there's a lot to say about personal responsibility in that game and how good intentions sour and how we can hurt ourselves and others around us with our desire to do good. So all of those things are great for Spider-Man 2. But it is just a weird game. It's very weirdly paced. It does not feel fully developed. The Venom stuff especially is dropped pretty hard. And all of it that is there is really cool. But there's just not much of it. It's a weirdly shallow, kind of oddly focused, but also bizarrely unfocused open world action adventure game. It's good. I liked it. Go play it. It was a very nice reprieve from the rest of the year. All right. Where are we going from here? Let's talk about the big ones, huh? Lies of P. Holy fuck, right? LOP came out of nowhere. LOP is a game that I expected to be terrible. I played it prior to release. Not all of it, obviously. I went to PAX and I played it at PAX. I played the Vertical Slice. I finished it, which was something that not many people did. And it felt floaty, and weirdly committal and heavy, or at the same time. Its narrative was very odd, the way that it was portrayed in that vertical slice that I played. Just overall, as a game, I didn't love it. I just thought it was a mess. When it came out, however, all of my expectations, every single one I had, was smashed. This game has the single most interesting and functional upgrade mechanics in any Souls game. The decision making that you make around handles and blades is really cool and allows for a very unique and varied approach to problem solving. It has a wild amount of streamlining compared to even other Souls games that have tried to streamline things, like Bloodborne, where Bloodborne only has 22 or whatever weapons. Every single one feels really unique. This game really only has like 5 or 6 weapon types, but all of them have their own uses and are very specifically created to cater to certain playstyles. There is something for everyone in Lies of P. It has wonderful voice acting, really interesting story, especially for a Souls game. I am a staunch believer that FromSoft's games have great narratives. They're incredibly well-written stories, even if you just have to do a little bit of work to get through them. But like, it's just wild that this game exists. Rishin mentions here, it's just a shame the boss weapons aren't allowed to interact with the interesting weapon system. This is my one complaint about Lies of P. I technically have 2, but it's the special mechanics of this game and the special resources in this game, like boss weapons, like the golden coins, like the cosmic cube square thingy that you can use. Being tied to mechanics that don't touch the rest of the game is so annoying. The golden coins being tied to a literal real-time ticking timer is fucking obnoxious. I hate it. It's terrible. And the fact that boss weapons can't be made to play with the cool weapon upgrade system is a bummer. But otherwise, Lies of P is an amazing game. I am so ready to see Lies of D. I cannot wait to see what the heck they do next. I believe the name of the developers was NeoWiz. I am fucking strapped in for whatever they make next because it's going to be so cool. So, yeah. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with the thing that I said I was looking forward to, watch the Lies of P LP because you'll get it by the end there. Next is Pseudo Regalia. Pseudo Regalia is the best 3D Metroidvania I've played in a very long time. One-person team, incredible, just incredible map design, amazing music, a really good example of doing a lot with very little. It's a game about the dreaminess, a dreamy space and hiding in not just nostalgia, but comfort. And there's a lot of comfort in this game. There are chairs that you can sit on. There's a lot of time put into just sitting still and enjoying the surroundings, or taking in the fun of movement and control. And this game, it's so clever, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's got the greatest 3D movement in any game I've maybe ever played. It's so pitch perfect. It actually expects things of the player. It wants you to get good at the mechanics. It has tons of cool speedrunning tricks and mechanics. It's made by someone who likes speedruns, who encourages them. It has a randomizer now, I think, which is just crazy. And it actually makes you have to get good at it. Like, there are so many moments in that game where we died because I wasn't doing things right, and I just had to learn. And I feel like it made me better at video games as a whole. I can now play other platformers and be like, oh, I get how I'm supposed to approach the problem solving of this mechanic. And in this puzzle. And I think that everyone owes it to themselves to play this game that costs $7. Like who are you kidding? Buy that game. It costs less than Starbucks. Like, just go do it. Go play it. It will run on a literal, like, anything. You could probably get your laptop from 2007 to play this game. So just do it. That's my biggest recommendation. It is definitely the best like solo project I've played forever. It's the best game I've ever played on itch.io. That's for sure. Just stellar. Just incredible stuff. Really special game. Jedi Survivor. The best Souls-like that isn't a Souls game. This game is also one of the best 3D Metroidvanias I've ever played by nature of being a Souls-like. Fallen Order was a really special game. It has flaws, but it showed an understanding of the Souls formula that I feel like no other Souls-like has ever touched, except Lies of P. It grounds Star Wars in a story of loss and family in the same way that all Star Wars properties are about family. But instead of going the Skywalker route, it examines sort of the trauma and the things that we do for and against family, including found family, which is really important, obviously, through this nature of like exploration and responsibility to even unseen people. I said a long time ago that Fallen Order is the most original trilogy Star Wars had ever been since the original trilogy, and Survivor is literally the perfect sequel. It is the Empire Strikes Back of any Star Wars video games. I'm a big Star Wars guy. I love The Mandalorian a lot. I love the original trilogy enough. I like Empire a lot. I like Episode 4 and Episode 6 just fine, but I love Empire. But I've read pretty much every single Star Wars canon material that came out until 2019. It was my pandemic hobby. I just did all Star Wars. But nothing compares to the respect and the love that I have for Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order. Cal Kestis is the most interesting Jedi, period, next to Ahsoka Tano. She's not a Jedi. She doesn't count. Cal Kestis is probably the single most nuanced Jedi that we have, especially after Jedi Survivor. And the way that it deals with pain and loss and our primal instincts is so even-handed and so humanistic that it stops just being a cool story about lightsabers and good versus evil and becomes more of a meditation on how we attempt to do good by denying ourselves, and we teach ourselves that we aren't worth things or that we can't have things. We can't live because of the harm that we can potentially cause. And Survivor looks at that and says, it's true that you may cause harm and that people may be hurt in your life, but it is more responsible and more empowering and more important even to learn how to handle those emotions and not just throw them away and not just turn away from them in order to make sure that worse harm isn't done. And to make sure that when you do confront darkness, you confront it in a healthy and constructive way. And it is so pitch perfect. It also is the single best love story in all of Star Wars. I don't think that there's any arguing with that. The arc that these games have constructed is incredible. Of course, the PC port of this game is a disaster. It still isn't very good, but it functions. In a couple of years, we'll be able to brute force performance and fan patches will come out and it'll be great. So maybe wait for those. But Jedi Survivor is the third best game that I played this year. And it is very special. And I'm never going to stop singing the praises of this game because a lot of people skipped out on it because the performance was really bad at launch and it was rushed to launch because of Diablo 4. But this game's the real deal. This game is truly the real deal, and everyone should give it a try. Don't let the fact that it was rushed get to you. Experiencing this game is just one of the best things you can do for 2023. So, all right, we're at the last two. Again, ignore Zomboid and Vampire. I uploaded them to the wrong tab. Can I delete? I cannot. Anyway, last two games: Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2. Now, how do I talk about the two most important games that came out this year? I feel like most people have seen the sort of have seen the sort of damage, the sort of fight that has come between these two games, that has evolved in the narrative of the gaming industry for this past year. Alan Wake 2 is the 13 years long waited sequel to a cult classic that everyone sort of rooted for, but not enough people supported. And it is just so... It delivers on every single front. It is a beautiful treatise on what it means to be a writer and what it means to create a story and kill your darlings and fight yourself into a state of creation. A huge focus of Alan Wake 2 is on the responsibility of a creator to do justice to his works, while also being changed by his works themselves. And that can be said about Alan Wake 1, in a sense. But Alan Wake 2, it struggled. It was in development hell for years. It didn't get greenlit until after Control. And Control, obviously the first game to really set up the Remedy connected universe in proper. Control was literally a way for Sam Lake and for Remedy to take control of their properties, to write themselves out of the corner that Alan Wake 1 had put them in, so they could make a new game but continue on with these characters that they owed so much to. Because that's what happened with Alan Wake 1. They wrote themselves into a corner, and then any sequel had to address that, but they couldn't get the sequel greenlit. There was a game that needed to come out after Alan Wake 1 that explained what happened so that people weren't left behind, but no one wanted that game. It wasn't the game that people needed, and Control was that game. And Alan Wake 2 follows up on Control, and it would have been very easy to just make an Alan Wake 2 with Jesse and with Darling and tie it into the oldest house constantly. And there are certainly a lot of connections between Alan Wake 2 and Control. But the biggest gift Control gave Alan Wake 2 was an expanded stage to play on that allowed them to take Alan from the position they wrote him into a wider world with more moving parts, so that they could maneuver around the roadblocks that were in front of them and create a much more interesting game. Its balance has issues. As a survival horror game, on normal difficulty, it is not hard. You're resource rich the whole time. As an action game, the combat is pretty simple, but as a full holistic experience, the ludonarrative in that game is amazing. The serial writing in that game is incredible. It has some of the best character arcs, some of the best dialogue, some of the best cutscene direction in any game I've ever played. And I'm not focusing on the meme stuff, right? Like the stuff that everyone has memed to death, like the Poets of the Fall, the Old Gods of Asgard music, the musical number, the wacky cutscenes. None of that is what makes Alan Wake 2 the incredible game that it is. It certainly makes it more special, and it's a huge standout reason why those games are amazing. But Alan Wake 2 is the most holistically well-integrated ludonarrative that came out this year. It is one of the best games I have played in a long time, and overall, I think it belongs up here in S tier. It is a stunning achievement and a incredible sort of piece. It's an incredible signal to what it means to be true to yourself and to take creative chances in the gaming industry and as a creator. And I think every single person who likes art, period, owes it to themselves to play Alan Wake 2 because it's a really special game. Baldur's Gate 3. Holy fuck. What is there to say about Baldur's Gate 3? Baldur's Gate 3 might be the single best game I played this year. What makes that different from Alan Wake 2? Baldur's Gate 3 has incredible character writing, has incredible story writing. Every single moment in this game is so beautifully well written, so beautifully composed. I love the story of this game. I have not finished it completely. I'm in Act 2. I love it very dearly. All of the character arcs have been very fulfilling. But the thing that makes this game special, on top of having great character writing and story writing, and dialogue in general, is its systemic design. Baldur's Gate 3 is the best sim I have played maybe ever. Because that's what Baldur's Gate 3 is. It is not just a CRPG. It is a immersive sim. And in that gets to the thing that I think a lot of people praise about Baldur's Gate 3. And that's that Baldur's Gate 3 is the most massive game I have ever played in my life. It has the largest scope. And it is very easy for games to grow in scope and lose what makes them special. Baldur's Gate 3 commits in every regard to every single decision it makes. It is the most variable, choice-based game I have ever played. Characters have a remarkable amount of unique dialogue based on what you do. It is not a simple binary choice game like something like you would expect from Mass Effect, from the literal dregs we have been putting up with in the RPG genre for so long, even going as far back as the original 2 Baldur's Gate games, even going as far back as Planescape Torment, an incredibly nuanced game. You still get screwed over by certain dialogue decisions being so binary. Baldur's Gate 3 is not that. Baldur's Gate 3 is maybe the single most nuanced RPG I have ever played. And that's before you get to the incredible dynamism of character arcs and character builds. Combat in Baldur's Gate 3 is one of my favorite things ever. I have sat on the couch. I love the Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough so much that I've been doing with Keith that when my GPU burned while I was in the Baldur's Gate 3 character creator this year, I then immediately went and bought the game on PS5, bought a couch to put in my bedroom, and then me and Brewing sat on that couch and played Baldur's Gate 3 for 30 hours to catch up to where I was in the PC LP, just so that I could play more of it because I like it so much. Now, is it better than Alan Wake 2? This is such a hard question because Baldur's Gate 3 is such an important game. It is a game that makes other games look bad by comparison because it does so much, and instead of losing its strengths because of what it does, its scope, it actually is just better for it. It just does every single thing it tries to do better than everything else, including more focused games. It is frankly embarrassing that this game is as good as it is because every other game looks bad in comparison. There is no CRPG that compares, except maybe Disco Elysium, and even Disco Elysium is sweating a little bit next to Baldur's Gate 3. But gameplay scope and narrative scope, even though they work with each other, are very different things. And ultimately, the story of Baldur's Gate 3 and the ludonarrative of Baldur's Gate 3 do not tie together in a way that improves both. They are very good, and they deliver very well, and it's impressive, but throwing a barrel at someone and having the joy of the immersive sim and the general world simulation and rules simulation of Baldur's Gate 3 does not make the decision-making that I make with the narrative and my contextualization of understanding my character or the stories or the party that we're with any different than it would if I just were reading a book. So, ultimately, I do not think the ludic elements of Baldur's Gate 3 are as closely tied to narrative as they are in Alan Wake 2, where your primary verbs in Alan Wake 2 are literally tied to the creation and the editing and the overall metaphor that the game has constructed. I still think Baldur's Gate 3 is probably, from a gameplay standpoint, the single best game I have played this year, the single best CRPG ever made, and maybe the best RPG of all time. It is astonishing and stunning and incredible that this game exists. It is embarrassing for everyone else that they have not achieved this level of success. Larian did this with basically compared to other companies, a fucking scrappy team of industry upstarts and passionate people. It calls back to the era of games made in a garage by 12 people with an idea and a lot of Mountain Dew. And that's fucking awesome. Baldur's Gate 3 is an incredible achievement. And that's why it's my number 2 game of the year. So this is all of my 2023 games ranked, ranked by how much I like them. They are really fun, great games. Every game on this list is worth checking out except Wo Long. You can throw Wo Long in the garbage where it belongs and never buy another Team Ninja game again. And you'll be better off for it, and your money will be well spent elsewhere. Buy yourself 10 copies at Starbucks, and you just drink them all at once, and you'll have a better time than playing Wo Long. But everything else on this list is great and worth playing. Highly recommended. You will get something out of every single game on this list, including the bad ones, including stuff like Final Fantasy 16, which I found disappointing. It is a very interesting... It's always interesting to play games that fail in a lot of ways. Just a really, really special... Just a really, really special year for games. One of the best years in games in a long time. And most certainly the best year for remakes ever, maybe. So that was 2023.